Today, I am so honored and super excited to have someone who is a major voice for the Atlanta food and restaurant world, TV and radio personality, co host of Atlanta Eats, Miss Mara Davis. Thank you so much for joining us. As a wine lover, I obviously appreciate good food, and I can't wait to hear and discover more ways that our two worlds collide. I have a feeling they do a lot. So, for everyone listening, I'm a huge fan of yours. Tell us about your multiple roles here in Atlanta and what you're up to as it relates to food and dining. What is telling us all about in Atlanta?
Okay, so the first thing is it's great that you talk about wine. I'm so happy to be on your show. But I had way too much wine last night. Definitely kept me on the couch for most of the day. But to answer your question, I do a couple different jobs, and you mentioned working for Atlanta Eat, so I do that. That's a freelance gig that I do, and I also do food reports for WABE, which is the NPR station here in Atlanta, 90.1. And I do a food report on The Burt Show, 99.7. I do that once a week. And my other job, my real job, is a talent booker for Adult Swim, which is the Cartoon Network. So I do that as well. So I wear many, many hats. But it's great. That's the life of a freelancer. You do it wherever you can.
And you're doing such a great job at that. I don't know how you juggle it all, but I see you, I hear you, and you really are impacting, at least for me as an explorer of wine and food. So you're doing something right, Mara. You're everywhere, and I love that. But how did you get started? Was it radio? Was it with Atlanta, in the Atlanta industry in general, or like why food and restaurants? What got you here?
Well, I'll tell you how it started. When I was on Z93 back in the day, I came to Atlanta in 1994 to do radio, and I done it. I was a rock DJ, and I would really experiment with interviewing all different kinds of people. And I had been doing a lot of work with the Atlanta Community Food Bank, and they were doing this thing called Simple Abundance Dinners, where a restaurant would it's one of those, like, you eat there and then a portion of the proceeds goes back to the food bank. And so I started having chefs on every month to talk about this, and this was probably in the late 90s, early 2000. I would have a chef on every week, and that's how I got to know Jerry Klascala, and that's how I mean that's he was like the first big chef who I became friendly with, and I was so into it. And through that, I ended up interviewing Anthony Bourdain, and things like that. Like, I interviewed Anthony Bourdain on the radio in 2000, right when Kitchen Confidential came out, and it was like still he wasn't the star he once became, and may he rest in peace. But I started interviewing a lot of Atlanta chefs and being really, really involved in the Atlanta food scene. And then once my radio ended at Dave FM, we went ahead and I got connected with Atlanta Eats. Stacey Shapiro called me and was like, you've been doing food for all these years, and what about being on our show? And there you have it. Here we are today.
Amazing. So it started by interviewing chefs, and that's kind of where you really started thinking, hey, like they have stories to share.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, I really do credit the Atlanta Community Food Bank with a lot of that, because the late Janice Reese, who was the marketing director there, and so many in the food community who've lived in Atlanta for a long time know Janice. And she was really way, way, way ahead of her time when it came to food. And so I just began exploring and dining out and really wanting to know the stories behind the restaurants and meeting the chefs and meeting the people and who were the ones making that work. And then I was lucky enough to get involved with Atlanta Eats. And then it's morphed into a bunch of different things. I've worked for different companies, like worked for a company called Tastemade, which is a video and digital company out of LA. I worked for them for a minute. I did some pilot for Food Network, which was fun.
That's amazing.
It was amazing until you don't get picked up.
Oh, you gave it your A for effort though, Mara. Most people don't get that far.
Right now, honestly, I mean, I think a crazy piece of visibility, honestly, is being on the Burt Show, because a big thing I do there is I ask people. I tell people they can reach out to me anytime for restaurant recommendations, because I always feel that it is challenging if you don't know where you're going, what you're doing the research. Like I will like crazy research any restaurant before I go anywhere. If I go to a city, I always want a local's point of view. So sometimes it is nice to have somebody who can point you in the right direction. And that's just really taking off. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see people are just like banging me, hit me up all the time.
I was one of those people, Mira. I'm going to just be no shame over here. I definitely look for stuff because I know Atlanta from a wine scene, but when I'm like, who's doing cool stuff with food? What's new? What types of flavors can I go try out? I go to people like you. You are somebody who people listen to. They are wanting to get recommendations. When I go somewhere for wine, I might know the cool things that I'm going to the restaurant to try, but when I'm looking for food recommendations, I go to people like you. Are you using social media? Like, how has that changed kind of where you source your information and create this database? I pictured in your head as like a database of when someone says soup, you're like, I've got you. Pizza, I've got you. So where do you build that, and how does that how does that maintain for you?
So there is a lot of mental notes that I take with that. I follow all the food blogs, or you know what? I don't want to say necessarily food blogs because it's more like trusted sources. Like I trust Eater Atlanta. I know about openings, what's happening, who's going where. There are certain restaurant critics in town that I really, really, for the most part, trust them. Christian Lauterbach from Atlanta Magazine, Jennifer Zeman from Atlanta Magazine, who's a friend of mine. People like that who I see, and I follow some people on Twitter where I can get information, or different, and Instagram and different things like that. I'm skeptical talking about so many food bloggers because I think there's a murky line in between people that are getting a promo dinner for free to say your restaurant's great. So I tread lightly with that. But if there are certain things that are getting a lot of buzz, like for example, today, everybody's talking about this slutty vegan food truck. I've heard it everywhere. It's on the news. It's all over Twitter. 1,000 people showed up for a veggie burger, right? Which is like, it's amazing, and I'll definitely try it. So it's certainly on my radar, and I definitely have to try it, but I'll never go the first day, the first week, or even the first month because I want to wait for something to breathe for a little while. But as far as my favorite places, I mean, that really changes all the time. Like I talked about on the Virtue this week, and I put it on my Instagram, how I went to Nina and Raffi, which is a great pizza place, and I really enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun. You know, the Atlanta restaurant scene is a tricky one for me because Atlanta is really oversaturated with restaurants, and it's very hard to find someplace that hits it on all points. And I felt that place was something that the pizzas were delightful. The service was on point. The atmosphere was fun. Where I've been to other places where there's just a whole lot of hype about and maybe something's off. But at the same time, I will never, ever, as a general rule, I never say anything negative about a restaurant and call them out by name on social media. Because I feel that that's bad form. I will be snarky about something. Like I had an experience at a steakhouse in Atlanta, a real trendy one that I wanted to try. And I really didn't like it. And I was really mostly upset with the service. And so I was able to call that out on social media in the sense where it's like, listen, stop trying to upcharge me because it's ridiculous. You know, you have a great server who will say to you, you know, this is a reasonable bottle and it's really good. And here's why. And that I think is, you know, because I think service is a big part of the dining experience.
It absolutely is. And especially from a wine and food pairing, if you're asking for a suggestion, it's sometimes hard to know if it's being the honest suggestion because of the food, or it's because they're trying to move it from their stock and it's what they're supposed to highlight this week. Now, I know there's a lot of pressure for that, but I also think that this is something else I think we have a lot in common in terms of wine and food trends. And I think that you always call them out. I love that we notice our hashtags. I know, Rose all day, we have Sunday Fun Day, these things. So there's trends in wine, there's trends in food. So I want to play a little game with you. It is give me a favorite trend and give me a trend that you wish would go away.
Okay.
And I want please tell me, and because I have mine for wine, to be continued, but for food, and if it relates to a food and wine pairing, cool. But just trends in general, how do you feel about some that are going on right now?
Okay, great. I love it.
So Rose all day. From the wine world, how does that fit with the restaurants?
Brunching so hard. Like brunch is I think one of the most overrated meals ever. And especially in Atlanta, like Atlanta just loves their brunch. And to me, it's like eggs. It's eggs. Like I'm going to make great eggs at home. I'd rather go to Grant Park Farmers Market and get some farm fresh eggs and make them myself with some local ingredients. So, if you listen to me on the Burt Show, like, the term bottomless mimosa is just like, it's the grossest thing. I had a lady email me just recently and she was like, where can I get a sexy brunch with bottomless mimosas? I'm like, ew, brunch isn't sexy.
Those are the kind of emails you get. This makes my day. Oh my gosh, I love it.
I could write a book on some of the emails I get, but go on.
Okay, so then there is, I love that you mentioned the lobster and the mac and cheese. So there are some people that are doing some really expensive wine with some really like cheap diner food type pairings. How do you feel about that? Like upping the price because of the combination of like cheap diner food with expensive wine. What does that make you think?
You know what? I actually, in a weird way, don't mind that. I think anybody who can elevate something that's like, if you can make comfort food somehow more decadent, if there's like and if you do it well, for like the General Muir is a great example of that, because that's deli Jewish food, but they bring it to a higher level. Ted Ginsburg's such a great chef. And I always have a big complaint about the Atlanta dining scene because I think there's no good Jewish food in Atlanta, or there's really no good bagel place or like, old school deli. But if I see I'm okay with paying a little bit more at General Muir because he really does that right. But, and then there's the bad way of it. It's like, don't put foie gras in my mashed potatoes or like something like that. So I think there are ways to do it if you can do it right.
Got it. So it's in moderation and given the right chance, do it right. Got it. I love it.
And I will never want lobster in my mac and cheese. Ever.
Noted. I will never make you order that, Mara. Perfect. Noted. Although I could probably pair it with something real good. We won't do that. And then another trend. Now, this is funny. I don't know if there's anything similar in the food world, but I do a lot of wine tastings. I'll go to tasting rooms. I love going to wineries, whether I'm traveling California or even up here in North Georgia. There's this thing, and it started a few years ago. I used to manage a winery, so I am guilty of doing it too. But we like to call it the bonus pour. So you get your list, and you have, let's say you have 6 or 7 wines on the tasting list, and then you're with the guests, and then you're like, oh, but today I have something else for you. And so then you pull it out from under the counter and you give them something extra. Is there something like that in the food world that you see of like, speaking of service, that's definitely a trend among some wine tasting rooms that I've been to lately. And it got me thinking, and when I'm dining out, what's similar to that, if there is one?
I do love a bite of something special, but I also think it's restaurants can easily do that. It's such a great service trick for the right kind of restaurant where you can bring that out ahead of time, because it does make you feel special. But even like I know at Varuni Napoli, they do like a pasta night and they wheel around the pasta that they make and just give it to people. So I think that's a nice thing. And also mostly people want to get stuff for free. I mean, I guess if it were good bread, but in a weird way, the restaurants that are now charging for bread service, I kind of think it's brilliant. Because except if it's shitty bread. If I'm going to pay $5 for a bread service, I think it's better, because then you're not forced to waste the bread if you don't eat it, because you're not going to eat a bread basket at home or whatever every night for dinner. But if it's bread service and it's really, really special and it's so good, I think that's a great little extra thing that restaurants could do, is give you maybe that's a way for them to buy less and better quality bread.
And it makes you feel special. It is that bonus of something you did not expect. I
Yes.
like that. That's really, really fun. So you were saying that you obviously go out a lot because that's how you're doing your research and things. But what do you do at home? Do you drink? What do you eat, Mara? I'm so curious. You're like living the dream. So is this a stay at home type of situation all the time, or what do you do when you're home?
So we had a few friends over last night, and so we did get catering last night, and we got it from Yala. I know I feel like it sounds like I work for Todd Ginsburg, but it just so happens that we got that. I don't go out as much as I used to because it's harder. I'm busier, but I try to go and try something new once a week if I can. I don't like to go to media openings because then I feel pressured to post something and I don't want to if I didn't like it. But as far as home cooking goes, my husband Mike is an amazing cook and he does the majority of the cooking, believe it or not. I am not a great cook. I am a average, get it done cook. I make like 5 things and I can do it really well. And then we have like a lot of Costco quick turnaround things. So we definitely do that. But yeah, I mean, it's really not as like fancy as you think. And I live near a lot of great restaurants that do takeout in Virginia Highlands.
You are in a wealth of wonderful restaurants in that area. That's perfect. And I think that's so funny too. I guess a lot of people ask me the same thing, you must drink all the time. And I'm like, well, I mean, I drink at my events and I drink when I'm learning and when I'm studying, but it's not like I'm always, down in my bottles at home. So it's kind of refreshing to hear that you think it's more glamorous than it might be. We're actually we're holding it down to a regular life pattern sometimes too.
Well, I think so. When I was doing more shoots for Atlanta Eats, and I still do those from time to time, it gave me an opportunity to be at restaurants more often, but I will always keep on reading about places. I mean, the other tough thing is Atlanta is just so big. My frustration with handing out these recommendations is when people don't get back to me and tell me what they did, because the feedback really goes a long way. That's why I make people work for those recommendations. If you reach out to me on Instagram, I'll always say, email me. Mostly because like I won't be able to remember to respond there, and I want it all in one place. And then I want to know if you're really, really serious about that recommendation. And I know if you go out of your way to email me, you sort of are. But I wish it could be a job and I could be trying up all the time,
Not yet. I hear you. Until we figure out how to stop time sometimes, then we can eat and drink all we want, which would be awesome. But you get all these emails. So just in terms of looking at the Southeast market for restaurants, in comparison to other places you've traveled or other places in the United States, you obviously have a pulse of inquiries coming in that kind of paint a picture for the consumers of what people are wanting to at least get from you and suggestions. So how does that compare to the general things that people might see on, national restaurant trends or that kind of thing? What are people asking about or asking for?
The majority of people maybe they're hearing me on the Burt Show, and they're definitely expanding their palate a little bit more, and they're saying, you know what, maybe I'm not going to go to that local chain restaurant, and I'm going to try something new. So a lot of people are stepping out on the edge, and so people want very typical things. I want not expensive. That's a big one. Something that won't break the bank. And then sometimes they don't like my response to that, because I'm always like, if you don't want to spend a lot of money, go ethnic, because you can experience something new and it's cheap. It's very inexpensive. As far as food trends go, I mean, I think sometimes be part of the request, but not really. I mean, not really, to be honest with you. It's there's Kim Severson, not to be such a name dropper, but she is the one of the food writers at the New York Times, and she lives here in Atlanta, and she's a great friend of mine. And she just recently wrote this article about food trends for 2019, and all the stuff that I read about, like cream cheese, iced tea, kinds of lettuce, and how microgreens are over, things like that. I think those kinds of things that go really trendy will take the average person a lot longer. Like there are a lot of people who just think like Brussels sprouts with bacon is just like a new hot thing. And, this is something we've been seeing on menus forever. So, but some people are great. Like, where do I get the best pizza? Or where do I get a great burger? But some people are like, I'm having a party of 15 and where can I go where it's less than $10 a person? And I'll be really honest. I'll be like, you can't even afford Chipotle with that. So
just telling it how it is.
So, but I've gotten some glorious emails from listeners and viewers who went to the restaurant, had a great experience. I just got a great one from this guy who works for Delta. He's a Delta pilot, and he wanted to do an anniversary for his wife, and so I sent them to Tiny Lou's, and they went and they stayed at the Hotel Claremont. Like, I mapped out a whole thing because I'll really get invested and try. I will go out of my way. And he just wrote me the most beautiful letter. And it was really funny because he went and had a great experience. I hadn't been to Tiny Lou's yet, so after him sharing his great experience, I ended up going there, and we had a great experience as well.
That's perfect. You were sharing, but then also wanting the feedback. So it's all about the feedback loop for you too, because you're hearing, but then you want the personal experiences back. And I think that's awesome. Okay. You were mentioning some of your favorite places. And before I let you go, one thing that I've had happen to me a lot is I get put in the hot seat with, hey, Kelly, I'm having steak tonight. What wine should I have with this? I do a lot of that kind of thing. It's my favorite kind of text messages. So everyone, please keep doing that. But I wanted to ask you, because not just restaurants, I think you get asked a lot, where's the best pizza, whatever.
Yep.
But because I think with my wine mind about really specific flavors, I'd love to hear maybe your like 3 standout that you just can't stop thinking about dishes in Atlanta. I mean, you can tell me a little bit about the flavors and where you found that dish, but a dish just on a menu, one item, a bite, and then I would love to then be challenged in the hot seat myself too, to pair a wine suggestion with your dish. And then the challenge to our restaurant friends out there is to see if that wine is on that list. But we'll take that next step. So tell me a standout dish to start that is really memorable. What should people seek out here in Atlanta?
There is the celery and cream and farm egg that's at Miller Union, where you have that great sourdough bread. I'm pretty sure it's that. And that dish is like a must. Like, you can't go there. You have to get that. That would be one.
The good news is, I would say that one of my favorite dishes in Atlanta is the farm egg at Miller Union. Yes. So we are on the same wavelength there. I would pair something very texture heavy in a white wine. I'd want some acid. The beautiful part about that creaminess is that it can stand up to a little bit heavier of a white wine. So I'm thinking like a Chenin Blanc, a South African, a New World Chenin Blanc that has this like creamy texture to it, with a little bit of oak, but a bright acid finish. And that would really highlight. It's almost like when I think about wine pairing, especially with that farm egg, I want to like think about what I'm drizzling on top of it. What would be the added spice, the added sauce?
Oh gosh, I would say a must dish would be maybe the macaroni and cheese at Community Q in Decatur. That is a standout dish that you can't go to Community Q and you can't go that.
I go all over the board with mac and cheese because I eat it a lot. So I actually think my favorite pairing recently I've done is actually a Brut Rosé, a bubbly, with mac and cheese. We might not like our rosé all day hashtag, but I do like my bubbly rosé with mac and cheese. So that's perfect.
What's funny is it's not that I love rosé. It's just the cliched hashtags, puns just drive me crazy. It's just every now and then okay, but this was it was knock knock Noki on heaven's door or something. It was really, really, really bad. I mean, I could write a whole book on bad press releases or like bad internet. Like the latest one is, and this is a millennial thing. It is not PEAK, sneak peek, and publicists. It is not sneak peek, PEAK. I get that all the time. I see it all the time. Like, what if it's not a sneak peek? Cliches make me crazy. Like farm table. hey, restaurants, you're not farm to table if you serve like one thing from a local farm. Like it just doesn't count.
Is there anything else that we should know about what's going on in Atlanta? What's the next thing we can hear from you before we sign off today?
Follow me on Instagram. Now you know, which is Mara Davis 2000. And you know, if you see me at a restaurant and I don't say anything about it, you know why.
You didn't love it. Got it. I noted. I love it. You're so honest. Thank you so much for your candid, amazing appreciation for the Atlanta scene. And it was a pleasure talking to you, Mara. Thank you so much.
Kelly, we did it.
We need to have wine together. Sounds like a great next date.